fellas, I have to say that the one genre of games that I seem to enjoy more and more the older I get is the venerable turn-based RPG. Whether it be the top-down variety of classic CRPGs like Planescape Torment or Fallout, or even some more JRPG-inspired adventures such as the ever-famous Persona or Shin Megami Tensei games. Now this of course has nothing to do with my advancing age or receding reflexes, since I can still impress the ladies with a nice round of rhythm games, especially if chased with some Buffalo Trace. But I enjoy these types of RPGs more for their relaxing style that I can enjoy throughout a day or for weeks on end, since they tend to be fad as all hell. But with a wizened age comes a sense of familiarity and a sort of been there, done that to the genre that has me craving newer and more refreshing experiences, such as 2014's Metaphor Re Fantasio that brings numerous elements from other Atlas games into a new package, or taking a beloved franchise into a new medium with Owlcat's Rogue Trader. Though I gotta say fellas that the times that bring a big fat ass smile to my face are the experiences that seemingly come out of nowhere and change the game, no pun intended, so completely that you honestly start to compare all other games of its class to it. Which brings us finally to today's topic of Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, the debut game from the brand spanking new French studio known as Sandfall Interactive, which is a pretty cool thing because man oh man, we get a lot of new studios, but sometimes they don't even make one game, sometimes they just break. So with that, we should probably get into the premise, but before we get into the premise, we gotta take a sip and cheers to Sandfall Interactive. Today I actually got some damn booze. Today we have Raffo della Puglia, and yeah, it's a good beer. So. Wonderful. So, let's talk the premise. Expedition 33 takes us to the world of Lumière, a post-apocalyptic world inspired by the very real post-apocalyptic country of France, which in some sort of magical catastrophe has the world ravaged, fracturing the land in inconceivable ways, and with it bringing the arrival of the Paintress and her monolith. Every year, the Paintress wakes to paint a new number on her monolith that annually counts down, and every time that she does so, anyone above the age of that number withers away into ashes, leaving those aged to the current year with one final year of life before the Paintress wakes to paint death again. And every year on the final year of life, the citizens of Lumière that have nothing left to lose embark on the expedition to the continent to make their way to the monolith to kill the Paintress. You play the role of Gustave, a man on the cusp of his final year of life that has decided to join the expedition to the continent to save all those that he holds dear. Joined by the intelligent Luna, the relatively carefree Ciel, and most interestingly of all, Gustave's 16-year-old sort of sister Maëlle, who has decided to join the expedition to always be with her brother to look out after him. With final goodbyes said by the citizens of Lumière, our wonderful gang of dead men and women walking embark on their ship to head to the continent and hopefully kill the Paintress in the eponymous Expedition 33. And then they killed the Paintress and then they lived happily ever after, is how the American version of this game would go, but this is a French production. And of course that means there's going to be a whole lot of heartstrings being tugged at, a whole lot of crying, a whole lot of tragedy, sadness, and a bunch of funny stuff as well. You can't have the tragedy without the levity. But this is a French game, so there's going to be a lot of tragedy. So much so that, take a guess right now, fellas, I'll have a counter at the end of this video. But take a guess, how many times do you think this game turned me into a wet, sop, seeping mess that just like made me cry and weep? But regardless, we should probably talk about the gameplay of Expedition 33 and how it takes a lot of different influences from different genres and different styles of games and mixes it into one package that makes it kind of interesting. Almost like a French JRPG, but it's a bit of a weird term, so let's talk about that. Expedition 33 makes us ask the odd question that we should have probably asked ourselves ages ago that I don't really think we have a good answer for, and that is just what in the hell do we call a JRPG outside of Japan? For those unaware, a JRPG of course stands for Japanese role-playing game. Now, not to knock on the game since it has its own style and gameplay that it differentiates it from other so-called JRPGs, But if you were to generally shape Expedition 33 to be compared to other games, those games would probably be Final Fantasy or something like Grandia, which neatly puts it into a classic JRPG. But of course, the game is developed in France, not Japan. So what in the hell do we call it? I've heard some people throw around Final Fantasy, but to be honest fellas, I'm a lot more partial to the term JRPG, which should suitably piss off my French homies. Now, pedantically worrying about who gives a shit term for this RPG aside, Expedition 33 changes a lot of things in and out of combat that gives it a refreshing coat of paint for turn-based RPGs that I haven't felt in a long time. To start off with, outside of combat, there are a lot of influences from the Souls-like genre that creep in that takes the usual RPG navigation of the world and turns it on its head. What I mean by this is that throughout the continent, you will see the rallying and resting points of all the other expeditions that came before you. At these points strategically placed across the map, you will be able to rest, stock up on your healing items, level up your characters, and learn new skills, but inversely all the enemies that you have defeated have respawned, so you'll likely have to deal with them again. And while this might not be the first time that a turn-based RPG has taken influence from the Souls-like genre in this sense, it certainly is for me the first time that I know of and the most novel use of it yet that both makes the game more dynamic and simplifies the gameplay in ways that are genuinely novel. It's one of those small details that make Gustave and the gang's journey through the continent a fight that they can barely get by. Every fight you use up precious limited resources and health, which has you choosing between pressing onward to the next expedition rest point, not knowing when you will see the next one, or if you're going to return to the previous point to rest and restock, but having to generally go through the enemies that you have just fought again. This not just makes your struggle through this world all the more dire, with sky-high stakes and nefarious Nevrons chipping at your life fight after fight, but it exemplifies the work of all the other expeditions that came before you, knowing that they had to go through the same things that you're going through right now, but left the trail for you to get to the Paintress. Personally, it makes the world feel more alive. With each and every new rest point, you take notice of the numbers of the expedition, thinking to yourself, shit, the men and women of Expedition 51 really made it all the way out here onto the continent? Which basically ends up turning you into thinking, damn, what will Expedition 33 see before the end that the other expeditions didn't? And what new horrors await before coming before the monolith in the Paintress herself? But that is just one aspect of the experience with Expedition 33 that makes it feel refreshing when you actually add on the fact that every single character in your party has their own mechanics. When it comes to the combat, it turns a refreshing game into a brand spanking new and novel experience. Now there's two big aspects of the combat that drastically change how you go about defeating the Nevrons, which are creatures of mysterious make created by the Paintress. And those two different things are the active combat systems that have you actively dodging and parrying in a fight, and the other is that each and every single character on your team has their own combat mechanics. To start off, we should chat about the more active parts of the combat system, and that is generally the ability for everyone to perform actions during both offensive and defensive actions, aka press buttons at specific times to create more damage or to receive less of it in return. For the buttony stuff, basically it means that you get to use all those wonderful buttons on the controller to actually do things apart from hitting A to select options, ranging the gambit of hitting A during time sequences to deal even more damage and effects, or to use the other buttons to dodge, parry, jump, and counterattack whatever the enemies are throwing your way. This means that apart from a few instances throughout the journey of Expedition 33, you can actually block, parry, or dodge pretty much most attacks, which makes the combat both feel all the more dynamic and at times punishing you for your ineptitude. And while it doesn't seem like much other than just making the combat all the more dynamic moment to moment by having to deal with the attacks of your enemies in a variety of ways, but it also influences the encounter design in really subtle ways that I really had grown to appreciate. See, when you get into a new area, all the enemies are typically new ones that you had never seen before, and so you don't know their attacks and how to effectively dodge or parry them for the most part, and they will show up one at a time at the beginning. This will allow you to learn the attacks of the enemy in a much safer manner, having the damage typically be divvied up to the 3 in your squad, But this is just the beginning. By the end of these levels, you'll be encountering multiple types of many different enemies, but since you are familiar with their attacks, you can actually take on these seemingly insurmountable fights with ease. It certainly has a sort of Souls-like feel where the enemies that used to give you a lot of grief at the beginning of an area become just a bunch of goons that you can plow through, to you learning how to deal with them in an expedient manner. But of course, it is never that simple, and where there used to be one, now there will be many giving you grief, but either way, it feels a lot like progress is always happening, which just enhances that expedition feel. Every single encounter you learn something and you use that knowledge and wisdom to put the next foot down and continue the journey that roughly 50 other expeditions have done in front of you, hoping that you can make it to the end to save everyone. Now, I know I might be drinking a little bit of too many of these because I did say we were going to talk about the character experience, but now actually we're going to talk about the character mechanics. A distinction that Expedition 33 has over many of its turn-based RPG peers is that each and every character that you bring to your party has wildly different mechanics that they use in combat, ranging from an S-rank system for more damage to applying stacks of cards that activate buffs and debuffs for enemies and so on. For instance, take Gustave, who has a mechanical arm to replace the one he lost ages ago, created by his apprentices that can discharge an incredible amount of electric lumina. This is done by charging up the arm throughout the battle by using his skills, and eventually when it reaches a threshold, it can be discharged using the overload skill to unleash a furious amount of electric energy to all the enemy Nevrons in the area. Another great example is the young Mael, who has a sort of stance system split between offensive, defense, and virtuose stances that buff Mael in a variety of ways. For instance, you might set up an enemy to be burned so she can switch over to her virtuose stance, and following that unleash a skill that when in that stance does a ridiculous amount of damage, pretty much annihilating any Nevron in her path with ease. Then there's also Ciel that uses a card system to her mechanics where you apply Foretell to her enemies, and with the higher amount of Foretell stacked, the more damage she can do, using her dark abilities while also changing her position into Twilight that has its own benefits. But if I were to talk about how intricate all these damn systems are, I would be here all damn day. Of course, I'm leaving quite a few exceptions you'll get along the journey that I will leave for you guys to discover for yourselves, but what I mean to say is that how you traverse the world, how you use your dodges and parries to delude the Nevrons, followed by using each and every party member's unique skills to stomp them out, it all blends together into making an incredibly refreshing spin on turn-based RPGs that I honestly would probably recommend it to those that are apprehensive of taking a dip into the genre to begin with. It's so damn good that if this was your first JRPG or turn-based RPG, it'd be like, damn, this is a really damn good combat system, and just for that, this is one I would recommend to people that haven't played a turn-based combat game before. Now that we got the gameplay out of the way, we should probably talk about other aspects of Expedition 33, and one of those is the exquisite, or whatever, however the French would say it, presentation that Sandfall Interactive has provided for us, and oh boy, we get such a treat for the eyes and for the ear. Fellas, I'm going to be real in saying that at this point in time, I think we can finally get rid of the every single Unreal Engine 5 game looks the same bro discourse, because over the last few months, there have been indeed a series of games that have made me look at the engine in a different light, but none more than Expedition 33 has. I've always been under the impression that it isn't the engine that you are using so much as having a distinct audio-visual style that only comes from having a team of incredibly talented artists to come and create a world for the game engine to bring to life. And with Expedition 33, they have done just that with its incredible world of Lumière. We have the visuals casting the light of the decaying city of Lumière with its avenues full of flowers and boulangeries, of people enjoying the last meal they will have in their lives, or the fractured continent where you can see reefs of spectacular coral floating in the air, bringing a shining light of beauty into this painted world while the bodies of slain expeditioners lie on the ground everywhere, having made some sort of last stand against the Nevrons. But that contrast between the beauty of the continent and the danger that lurks hidden away in many of these beautiful locales is an intrinsic part of the art direction and experience, a contrast between the light and beauty of creation, nature, and wonder, created from a world long lost, and the Vanta black darkness of danger lurking in the shadows, tragedy to befall the expedition, and melancholy of not just a world long lost, but one that with every year dies a little bit more. Matter of fact, that contrast is so intrinsic to the world of Expedition 33 that it's in the damn title as Clair Obscur, which is the French way of saying chiaroscuro, an Italian word meaning light-dark to describe the use of strong contrast between light and dark colors in painting. So think of the work of Caravaggio, Rembrandt, or Vermeer, and you can see it not just in the art direction but also as one of the themes in the narrative, but we'll get to that a bit later. Of the art design, I especially love the enemy designs that take a little from each of the areas that you come across. So you'll see Nevrons in an overland reef holding sea mines by chains as if they were balloons, or creatures that are made up of hexagonal basalt columns of the seaside cliffs, even using these columns as weapons. And in every area that you come across, the visual design drastically changes, making it feel like every single area tells its own little story and the creatures that inhabit it, the Nevrons that are pitted against you, or even just the environment itself, with areas littered with the corpses of slain enemy Nevrons and expeditioners, or others remaining relatively untouched by the expeditions of Lumière. In fact, parts of the visual design that remain relatively static no matter where you go are many of the aesthetics that have to do with the expeditioners, whether it be the wooden remains of prior expeditions or the scattered technology of Lumière. Hell, the flags of other expeditions thankfully stick out like a sore thumb for you to be able to see where they are, which goes to show that of all the things that have been created in the fracture, the one that is the most alien to the continent is ironically the remnants of Lumière. Though if there was one area that I have the most minor of gripes is that while the characters like Gustave, Maël, Luna, and Ciel, and so on look great, sometimes in cutscenes, the animation and the lip syncing, it's a little bit off, but honestly, it's really just kind of a gripe or just sort of, like me picking at things. Personally, these moments aren't going to ruin your experience. It's more just a friendly reminder that Expedition 33 is in fact a AA title and comes with many of the rougher edges every now and then. But for the most part, the game is punching way above its weight class. Just like my liver with this raffle here, an aspect of Expedition 33 where it punches way above its weight class comes in the soundtrack for this game. And man oh man, Lorientestad has composed an exquisite soundtrack. One of the things that hit me immediately when the reveal trailer for Expedition 33 debuted nearly a year ago at the Xbox Showcase was the beautiful aria that opened it up. That is one of the tracks that has just lived in my mind palace rent-free for the better part of a year and will continue to be in there probably till I'm done listening to the soundtrack. And I mean this with all due respect and genuinely as a compliment, but I gotta say fellas that what Lorientestad has done with the soundtrack for Expedition 33 reminds me a whole hell of a lot what Keiichi Okabe has done with his soundtracks for Nier or Drakengard, in the sense that the soundtrack is so wonderfully layered that it reminds me of those games but has breathed a life of its own. What I mean by layered is that each and every area there are a plethora of different tracks depending on where you are in the map, what act you're in, what type of enemies you're fighting, and then taking and remixing those aspects into different parts of the soundscape. For instance, each and every character has a theme that many times is remixed in different ways, such as having a music box version of the track or even just one on guitar or piano. With all of these layers, Testad has created a soundtrack that genuinely is always moving forward. It never likes to do the same thing twice, always introducing new concepts and themes that expand the world in ways that showcase how beautiful but profoundly tragic it all is, while mixing it with moments of bombastic levity with some of the combat tracks that make you do a little jig. To start off talking about specific tracks, I'll start with the theme for Gustave that has this beautiful arrangement of strings, performing this melancholic tune that just so perfectly encapsulates the genuine sadness at the center of Gustave's character. It perfectly fits the theme of a man that has lost so much but somehow in some way has continued on to fight for a better world. Whether it be for his apprentices back in Lumière, his adoptive sister Maëlle right beside him, or for the memory of his loved one Sophie who gommaged at the start of the game. Moving on, the next track I want to talk about is called Lumière, which crazily enough is the theme for the city of Lumière. That is this perfect showcase of providing a sense of wonder, of a civilization of great engineers, artists, adventurers, musicians, and loving families, but there's those bits of melancholy that peer throughout. The sort of melancholy that highlights a civilization in decline that will be no more in just 33 scant years, barely a generation. Lumière is also one of the tracks that has various different layers to it, with the motif of Lumière showing up all throughout the city in numerous styles, ranging from a version on acoustic guitar, there's also an accordion version that would be fitting outside of a boulangerie, and possibly my favorite being a very jazzy version that fits right in with the rest of the soundtrack. Now to get away a bit from the dreariness, we got a track known as Gestural Merchant that plays anytime that you fight one of the merchants in the game. Which I guess I should probably explain that some of the best items or effects in the games are locked behind fights that you have to do with the Gestrals. The Gestrals are silly little beings that are genuine goofballs that are basically living paintbrushes that love to get into scraps with one another, so with every merchant in the game there is an option to fight them that if you defeat them will unlock some of the best stuff that the merchant has to offer. So this track plays whenever you fight them and has this sort of like proggy bop that to me feels like you're in for a scrap, but it's nothing to be worried about. Almost as if you were to fail, you're going to be fine since you're just kind of scrapping for some loot. And the final track that I want to talk about is actually the title track for the game that shows up throughout the entire adventure and is probably the track with the most motifs throughout the whole experience, and that is of course Alicia. Alicia, for those with astute ears, is the very aria that played in the reveal trailer almost a year ago that has captured my imagination with Expedition 33. And I'll be damned if there isn't a better theme for the whole experience out there. The track to me, with its beautiful aria and longing strings, brings to me a profound feeling of beauty, wonder, the curiosity of things just behind the veil. But with it also great melancholy, a testimony that the journey to defeat the Paintress will be one that is wrought with tragedy. And in contrasting these two feelings so perfectly makes the name of the game all the more impactful. And the whole soundtrack is like that. It's constantly juggling the two halves in a perfect pirouette of beauty and melancholy, hope and tragedy, light and dark, chiaroscuro, clair obscur. But believe me fellas, there's so many other tracks I would love to talk about, but many of them are explicit spoilers for events that happen in the narrative, so I'll have to leave it up to you guys to discover for yourself. Hell, my favorite track in the whole game makes me feel like I finally scaled an entire mountain with the weight of the world on my shoulders. And right when you reach that peak and see the horizon, it's when your back finally breaks under the pressure of what Expedition 33 has put you through. Though, if you know me fellas, you know what's coming up next, so without further delay, I think it's time that we let the game do the talking.
Blue trees.
Something's disrupting the chroma around here. Be careful.
Those who come after.
The storm is
Ouais.
Gustave? Are you real? Well, you sure smell real enough. Blade cut through the flames.
Esti tonere marina, esti linaki soledad, tona lora tovla, alina. Esta surano taki l'air noir tonare fuego verso alina ai.
Man, oh man, fellas, when that track kicked in, the one that I didn't want to spoil because, I would spoil things. When that track in, it broke me. The game broke me at that point. And the fact is that weeks later, I'm still thinking about that track. It lives in my head rent-free. And the fact that a track can do that to me weeks after I've put down the game, that's a hallmark of a great soundtrack. So to all the fellas out there at Sandfall Interactive, especially L'Oriente Star, you guys have done an exquisite job, so kudos to you guys. But there is one aspect of the game that we haven't talked about yet that is the most important aspect, and that is, of course, the narrative of Expedition 33. One that is so beautifully tragic and awful, and it just tugs at the heartstrings. But there's so much beauty in this world as well that it showcases, and it's like, man, it's something special. So let's talk about it. Boy, where do I even start with the narrative of Expedition 33? Well, I guess I should probably start in saying that I love the premise of the setting and that Lumière is this sort of post-apocalyptic world where the defining element of everyone's lives is that they know exactly when they will likely die by the Paintress's hands. When we enter Lumière in the eyes of Gustave, we see it as a world that is genuinely near the end of its rope. The more expeditions go out to combat the Paintress, the more souls never come back, and another year is taken away from the lives of everyone else. The second that anyone is born in Lumière, their tragedy has already been written. They know how long they're supposed to have left with their parents, they know how long they have left if they ever have kids of their own, and they'll know the day that they'll gomage into nothingness. Yet, how the characters deal with this tragedy differs, and it's a reflection of how people take it in real life. Take Luna for instance, where the tragedy forms her into a woman of a singular vision. Her goal in this life that she has is to defeat the Paintress, and she will stop at nothing, not even with personal tragedy along the way, to fulfill her goal. This is then contrasted with Xiao, who has lost just as much, perhaps even a bit more than most in Lumière, with a backstory that I won't spoil, but instead of hardening her stance on reality, she takes the time to reflect back and enjoy what life she has lived so far, and will go to meet the Paintress knowing it is likely a suicide mission, but with a smile on her face. After that, there's Mael, who's the black sheep of the group. She's only 16, so she has at least 9 years of life ahead of her, but instead of choosing to stay behind in Lumière, she decides to essentially forfeit it by joining the expedition, with the one brother that she has to either succeed or die beside him. Which brings us to good old Gustave, who to me has the most complex feelings when it comes to the expedition. He joins it knowing that his life is forfeit, but is compounded by the fact that just before they leave on their expedition, Sophie, his ex-paramour, dies in the gomage, leaving Gustave all by himself, and all the things he regrets not saying in that moment. And it's that regret that makes Gustave so damn compelling. It would have been one thing to have Gustave be happily married to Sophie and he lived a nice life, until the Paintress so terribly snatches it away from him, spurring him to join the expedition to avenge his loved one, which is how an American writer would have probably done that. But thankfully for us, this is a French game, and our not-so-French lead writer Jennifer Svedbergian has an even juicier tragedy to unfold. Now this is a part of the prologue, so to me it's not a spoiler, but Gustave and Sophie had been separated for years, and it's the regret of not being able to make it work, the regret of not having said anything for 4 years, and the regret that he waits till the day of her gomage to tell her how he really feels, how much he loves her, how much time he wished he still had. But the tragedy is that even then he was never able to say how he feels to her in the end. He was there for Sophie in her final moments, but he was not able to let go how he felt, and that regret he'll bring with him on the expedition. He'll bring that with him on all the actions that he does, and most importantly of all, that regret will live on in his soul till the day he dies. And that to me is the most gut-wrenching tragedy that for me didn't just break my heart in the first 30 minutes, but had me on board till the credits rolled. You know, gang, I have been fortunate enough that for the most part, there hasn't been somebody in my life that when I've had something deep down inside that I wanted to say or I needed to get off my chest, that I've always had the opportunity to say that. So seeing the eyes of Gustave in the beginning where he couldn't do that with Sophie, it really impacted me. And that really put like a shine on things that's like, damn, this experience is going to be special. And that's only the prologue, fellas. Like, holy hell. A way that I have described the narrative for Expedition 33 is that right at the moment when you see Sophie gomage, the devs stab you right in the friggin' heart with a knife and then twisted it, making it hurt a whole hell of a lot and fills your heart with heartache. Though, after a while, it kinda goes away. You begin to see the beauty of the continent, and in many twisted ways, you get to see the beauty of the creatures that the Paintress has created. While, they're kinda there to basically kill your ass, they are still beings in one way or another, just one that base humans can't understand. But the second that heartache goes away, the instant that you let your guard down and forget about that knife still jutting out of your chest, the devs come in and twist that knife in some awful tragic event that happens throughout the narrative, and believe me, fellas, that it will continue to be that way until you hit the credits. And even when the credits roll, depending on how you feel about the narrative, that knife will still be there, as it is with me, to remind you of the pain of such a tragic narrative. And I might be a sicko in saying this, but because of it, Expedition 33 is genuinely one of my favorite narrative experiences of the last few years, probably since experiencing Signalis. It's really easy for a narrative to be this tragic and screw it up, but for the fine folks at Sandfall Interactive, they understand that for there to be tragedy in your narrative, you need a reason for it to be tragic, and Expedition 33 does this by showing you the beauty of the world, of all the creatures that inhabited, the hopes, fears, dreams, and struggles of every member in the expedition that grounds the experience. And without that levity, without that humanity, the tragedy just doesn't work. And thankfully, Expedition 33 understands that, so the tragedy works all that more. Though I will admit, fellas, that while Expedition 33's narrative really resonated with me, it might genuinely be too much for a lot of you guys out there. Without exaggeration, the narrative is so bittersweet in both senses of the word, and some of the twists and turns that happen in the narrative might be too much with how tragic and cruel it can be to the characters that we have fallen in love with. But, like I said, fellas, I'm a huge sicko that loves these sort of tragic stories, and Expedition 33 is the right dosage of bittersweet storytelling that I have been craving for a long time, and thankfully the gang at Sandfall Interactive have provided that to me. So I really have to tip my hat to Jennifer Svedbergen in writing such a balanced narrative to allow the whole thing to work, and to be real, fellas, it was a sort of story that captured my attention from the beginning to the end, and will continue to live in my head rent-free probably for years to come, in the same way that a lot of other great experiences always do. And with that, fellas, that leads me to proudly giving Clair Obscur Expedition 33 an absolutely incredible and phenomenal 10 out of 10. Once more, I need to remind the audience, both new and returning, that a 10 out of 10 is not a perfect score, but a legendary score fit for a title that will be the new benchmark for all games in its genre moving forward. And the folks at Sandfall Interactive deserve every last bit of the praise that they are receiving, and have been incredibly humble in their recent rise to excellence. Expedition 33 might not be the most original game in terms of turn-based RPGs, but it profoundly wears all of its influences on its sleeve and remixes and blends all of their elements to create a genuinely refreshing and novel experience that from now on I'm going to point at to compare to other games, which is incredible from a brand new studio of relatively unknown developers that showcases that talent and ingenuity are out there for someone to discover, or to all band together to make their own little masterpiece. I especially love the story that Sandfall Interactive, a team of just 30 people, most of which are ex-Ubisoft devs, went and struck out to create their own studio, found their lead writer on Reddit and their amazing composer on SoundCloud, of all places, and gave everyone the resources, even if modest, to create a truly transformative experience that I and many others will have the pleasure of playing through. So with that, I genuinely recommend Clair Obscur Expedition 33 to anyone that seems interested, especially to anyone that are fans of turn-based RPGs or JRPGs. And if you are a little apprehensive of that style of gameplay, I think there are enough active elements in the combat that can ease just about anyone to have fun playing the game and enjoy this spectacular narrative. Now, talking about the game length, with doing some extra bits, my time with the game came to around 40 hours, which is an understated element that I enjoyed compared to some other RPG experiences that feel the need to bloat out the runtime. Hell, I even think the brevity could entice others that are still on the fence for such an experience. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 can be found at the relatively humble price of 65 Canadian dollars or 50 euros, which is absolutely worth it for the experience, but for those that are a little bit price conscious, you can also pick up the game at the moment on Xbox Game Pass. And there you have it, fellas. That is the end of the video, in which each and every single one of you guys that have made it all the way out here, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I really do appreciate that you guys have made it this far, and each one of you guys that watches this trash, because I love it. So thanks for watching it. And For those that have been wondering what that number was that I was talking about at the beginning, it was 16. Whew. 16 friggin' times that this game has destroyed me and left me into a weepy mess. And I gotta be real, fellas, like, this game broke me. It broke me much in the same way that Lehman Russ broke Magnus the Red over his knee, or how I hope a 6'5" Finnish Amazon woman will break my neck with her gorgeous, gorgeous thighs. But yeah, this is a really special experience. Like, Expedition 33 was just... Every so often comes a game where just it like redefines things and makes you look at games and things in a new light. And it's just like Expedition 33 is just the latest one of those for me. It's honestly like, as a narrative experience, I don't think I've played anything this good since probably Signalis that has really resonated with me. And then as an RPG, like being so interesting and fantastical and just different, I don't think I felt an RPG this different since probably Nier Automata. So I can definitively say this is probably the best RPG in the last 10 years. So, and that's not a small feat. That's pretty damn incredible. That, fellas, I gotta leave you guys here to this because this video is gonna get long enough as it is. And I'm trying not to make my non-retrospectives too long, but you know me, you know how it goes. But this game is probably also the one game, I'm going to be real, that probably is going to kick me right into the pit of being a francophile finally, because I've been peering into it like, man, I really do like the French. This sort of stuff is pretty cool. This game kicked me right in, and I'm like, you know what? The French are pretty damn cool. So, hey, cheers to the French. Salut. But with that, fellas, this is Tom the Chosen One, hoping you all have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'm going to gommage myself all over my beautiful 6'5" Finnish Amazon pet amour, and I'll see you guys next time. Hey, take it easy.